Here we go.
Welcome to today's Link Senior webinar. We are going to get started shortly.
Hello, everyone from beautiful Columbus, Ohio. This is where I am. Where are you, Alex?
I am in Oxford, Ohio. Hello to all the other folks out there in Ohio and everywhere too.
Beautiful state of Ohio.
Sorry, I had to close my door so that in case the dog barks, it won't hopefully reverberate to everyone else's ears.
Where are you, Katy, today?
I am at home in Oxford, Ohio as well.
Oh, Oxford, Ohio.
Yeah. And we've got quite the zoo. We made some poor pandemic decisions, and we have a pandemic puppy who's a year now, but she's still very enthusiastic and loves to bark at everybody walking by. And we have 4 chickens, and we had a little chicken emergency yesterday. Something grabbed one of our chickens and took a bite out of her. So we had to travel an hour and a half to go to an avian veterinarian to learn about how to do wound care on a chicken.
On a chicken, okay.
This is not what I signed up for.
I don't think anyone would sign up for this. All right, it's actually 1 p.m. Eastern, and I'm very excited to get started. Megan, do you want to start us off?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Link Senior webinar. Today, we are providing 1 free NAB, NCAP, NCCDP, NZSRDT, and NCTRC CEU credit. To be eligible for those credits, you do need to remain on this webinar for the full hour. At the end of the webinar, I am going to provide the required post-webinar CEU survey evaluation link in the webinar room chat box. And I will also send it by email this afternoon, so please check your email spam folder. The survey must be completed by midnight Eastern Time this Thursday. If you have any questions about our CEU process, we ask that you please email us at webinars@linksenior.com. Your CEU certificates will be issued by email before the end of the day on Friday, July 23rd. Again, please be sure to check your spam folder that day. And with that, I'll hand it over to Charles D. Vilmorin, CEO and co-founder of Link Senior. Charles?
Thank you, Megan. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning for some of you on the West Coast. It's a pleasure to be with you today. As Megan mentioned, my name is Charles D. Vilmorin, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Link Senior. And we're here for our July 20th Activity Strong webinar. And we're going to be talking today about a really important topic, which is what providers have learned, some of their perspective on how to implement a person-centered communication tool during a pandemic, right? So obviously unusual time for actually a fantastic tool product that I really can't wait to learn more about. And this session is going to be led by Dr. Katy Abbott and Alex Heppner from the Miami University, the Scripps Gerontology Center in Ohio. Before we do get started, I know that I wanted to share a quick thought, which is that I know that our industry is reopening, right? Where we've made significant progress with the vaccine. We've made significant progress in terms of reopening our communities. And I get the pleasure of actually visiting some of these days, which is great. But I do want to mention that I wish everybody on the line to try to enjoy as much as possible the summer, the holidays, and so on, because I know that we're also going through major challenges related to staffing. So hopefully some of the things that we'll learn today, because it enables this idea of interdisciplinary work, it is foundational to the work of Dr. Katy Abbott and Alex, that you'll learn something that hopefully you can go back to your organization, your community, and your team and implement. Before we get into the meat of the topic, I wanted to share a little bit about us, Link Senior. So again, as I mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Link Senior. Just to give you some perspective on who we are and some of the values that we go by. So 6 years ago, we started this campaign called Old People Are Cool for a number of reasons. Elders are cool, obviously, but also we don't really like the idea of segregation based on age. So this is just a fun way to have a discussion about age and empower people over that topic. And then, as a lot of you are aware, in the middle of the beginning of the pandemic last year in March, we at LinkSenior decided to take a stand, and we partnered with Activity Connection, NAP, and NCAP, and built this platform called Activity Strong to acknowledge the amazing work of all of you, activity and life enrichment directors, but also try to seek ways to empower you and educate you with the best education out there. And that includes today's presentation, which again, I can't wait to hear and learn more with you. To give you an idea of who is LinkSenior, we provide a resident engagement platform for senior living. So we actually work with assisted living, memory care, and nursing home providers to help you professionals elevate the experience that you deliver to your residents. Essentially, what we do is we augment your efforts where we can triple to quadruple the amount of programs you do, and we also help you track that to get credit for your amazing work. So if you're interested in learning more, please find out by filling in the survey at the end of the webinar and be in touch. We're very proud of our work where it's actually evidence-based. We published a study in 2019 where we showed some of these amazing outcomes, including increase in social engagement. And then that was again in a peer-reviewed journal in 2019. So very proud of my team's work, of the work of our clients. And again, if you're interested in learning more, please reach out. So that's a little bit about us and what we do and what we hear. What I wanted to share is just one quick thought. I like to do that sometimes as an introduction to today's speakers. And I think the best way to start is and it's kind of it's a nice quote that I like, which is basically a person's a person no matter how old, right? So I hope that a lot of you recognize the quote from Dr. Seuss, right? A person's no matter how small. And at LinkSenior, we thought it'd be fun to actually change the words because small, old, right, whatever the characteristic, a person's a person, right? And I think that when we take a step back and we look at our work, right, in aging services, the one most common thread that we all fight for in a good way, right, like we try to improve society, is the fact that we should dignify, respect, and value our elders, right? And I think that's a fantastic way to start conversation. Again, think of Old People Are Cool, think of this idea. And with that, also recognize that a person's a person, right? That's essential to person-centered care. I'm sure it's the reason why a lot of you, if not all of you, show up at work, right? These are all people that we want to provide the best experience regardless of the age, but also regardless of who they are. So this is why I'm very excited to introduce you to both speakers today. They've worked for decades on products and concepts and research on how to enable providers like you to not only understand who each elder you serve is, right, but understand their preferences and where they are today and enable that, right? How do we enable with a workflow? How do we make sure that everybody on our team understands that? So a lot of the preference-based living work is about introducing this as an interdisciplinary tool, as a process. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce both Dr. Katy Abbott, who is an associate professor with Miami University, and Alex Heppner, who is a senior research assistant. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so they can share their screen and their amazing presentation. And with that, thanks everyone. Thank you, Katy. Thank you, Alex. I'm excited.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Charles. And we're just delighted to be here. It's lovely when you meet like-minded groups and individuals, and there's a lot of just natural collaboration and synergies there that we enjoy. So we're delighted to be here with you, and we're excited to tell you about, I'm going to look over here because my screen's over here, so when I look away, but we're really excited to tell you about a project that we've been working on throughout the pandemic. We want to tell you just a little bit about the Preferences for Everyday Living Inventory, or the PELI for short. We want to tell you about the means of communication through what we call Preferences for Activity and Leisure Cards, or PAL cards for short. And all of our work has a quality improvement component to it. So we're sharing this information with you in terms of how it can be a quality improvement project for your organization. And then we want to share the voices of the people we worked with you and what they told us about going through this process. Okay, so what I want to do right now is I want to try something fun. I want you to think about, what do you enjoy most about your job? And Alex, if you could drop this link and code into the chat box, what I'd like you to do is see if you can go to menti.com. A screen will pop up and you want to enter this code 23046474. And the question should come up, and I'm going to switch screens to show you the Menti screen. And so let me just go to here. And so did it switch? Can you see it now?
It did. Katy, I have a quick question. Is the space important between the 4 and the 6?
I don't think it is.
Okay.
So I think right up here, and I'll copy this link too, and I'll drop it in the chat box. And so think about, oh, you've got it. And then here's, I think this link will also take you directly to it. And so tell us, what do you enjoy most about your job? I'll give you a couple minutes to hear and think about it. And I was trying to find some fun images to think about, and it just seems like this is July and sunflowers are blooming, at least here in North America. And so that's something that's fun to do. Oh, okay, we've got somebody that says quality of life. Oh, look at this, creativity, relationships, I love that. The fun residents, absolutely. It's the resident interactions, right? The flexibility, it's rewarding, it's satisfying, improved mood. Oh, that's so much fun. Look, I love this. This is so great. And I think what's happening is that, as people are entering things, we're seeing, more and more, but the bigger words are the things that are being shared most frequently. Oh, I put roller skating. Making a difference, right? Yes, spending time listening to stories, right? Like that's who we are, right? And so the joy I bring to others, the people, the quality of life, smiles and laughs, the family feeling, the people, the coworkers, a great team, empowerment. Oh, what a wonderful word, empowerment, right? Oh my gosh, I don't want to stop. This is so great. Let me see. Love, respect, vacation. Oh, I love vacation too. Helping others grow. How wonderful is that? Making my residents happy, the residents smiles. Look at all the smiles and joy. I mean, this just warms my heart, right? Like this is why we get up in the morning, right? Oh, I love it. Okay, so keep putting some things in. I'm just going to look to see if I see anything else. Military life, family, making a difference. Have I missed anything that Alex, you see that we should highlight?
I saw purpose come up. Let's see, a lot of people, quality of life, smiles, connections.
Advocacy, that's huge. So let's share with you a little bit about how what we're doing can help you do all of these things in your job. So I'm going to switch screens again and just make sure that, okay, so can you see the slides again? Great. So we focus on preferences. Person-centered care can mean a lot of different things, but we particularly focus on the preference as the foundational building block, because if you don't understand somebody's preference, you can't understand them at all. You can't understand what they would like to do during the day or how they would like to be cared for. And so we seek to understand an individual's preferences, goals, and values, and to honor those throughout the care delivery process. And as I mentioned, we view assessing and integrating preferences as one way to provide person-centered care. It's not the only way. It's just one way. And when preferences are understood and honored, people have a greater sense of autonomy. They have a higher quality of life and emotional well-being. So how do we get there? We have focused on developing a way of investigation or a tool to explore with individuals. We call it the Preferences for Everyday Living Inventory, or the PELI for short. And it's a series of questions that we use to learn more about an individual's most important preferences. It's evidence-based, meaning we talk to hundreds and hundreds of older adults who were both receiving services in their home and in a nursing home to understand, does this question really mean what we think it means? So for example, how important is it for you to take care of your mouth? And somebody may say, well, yeah, you have to watch what you say around here. That's very important. But that wasn't what we were trying to understand, right? We were trying to understand how important is it to you to take care of your mouth, teeth, and gums. So we had to make sure that the questions actually elicited what we wanted, what was meaningful to the older adults. Now, 16 of the PELI items are consistent with the MDS Section F. If you're in a nursing home, you might be familiar with those items. There are altogether, there are 72 items. They're each standalone items. You do not need to use all of them. Pick 10 that work for your organization and work on that. And so information from these questions can be incorporated into care and quality improvement efforts. Here's an example of what one of the questions might look like. So how important is it to you to go outside to get fresh air when the weather is good? This is an MDS question. We've grouped it in terms of importance or not importance so that we can wrap quality improvement around it. And of course, it's not only good enough to know if it's important or not. We also need to know, well, okay, if it's important to you, then which type of weather do you like to go outside in? For me, I'm an all-weather kind of person. I'm out if it's snowing, I'm out if it's raining, I'm out if it's hot. Like, I love to be outside. And so, but other people may have different preferences. So we need to understand that. Another example, how important is it to you to have regular contact with friends? Well, yeah, it might be important, but well, then who can we help you connect with, right? So we just need a little bit more information from folks to help make sure that we're able to honor that preference. And when would you like to talk with people and how? Okay. So what we heard from providers is that they were able to do the PELI, they were able to ask folks their preferences, but then the information just went into a drawer. And that was not helpful, right? Like all of that effort on both the staff and the residents' time or the client's time for it to go into a drawer, that's valuable currency to just sit in a drawer. And so we talked with providers. We said, well, what could you do with it? And they shared with us some ideas that they had. And we helped to develop the proof of concept and then test this provider idea, right? Which we love to do this because you guys have the best ideas and pain points that need innovation. And we have the resources to be able to test that out and do sort of the grunt work behind the scenes to give you something that you don't have to feel like you're wasting your time about. So what a PAL card is, it's a 5x7 laminated card. And on the front side, it has a person's name and a little bio. And on the back side, it has space for 6 important preferences or more. You can squeeze some more in. And the idea here was providers said, well, we can put it in a binder, but nobody reads it. And so we thought, well, could it travel with the person throughout the community so that wherever they were, an individual could quickly read the card and start a conversation? And so ideally it's placed on a wheelchair, a walker, somebody's door, maybe a bulletin board. Here's a bigger example of what the PAL card might look like. So you can see here for John, we've got a little bit of a bio here, and we've got some important communications. Now, one innovation we did with this particular round, this is the 3rd time that we've had a PAL card QIP that we've run. We've started working with speech language pathologists who have told us that oral communication is just one means of communication. And there are lots of ways to communicate, and we should understand what people's communication preferences are, which of course we should. And so you'll see these images, these little icons over here that will tell you a little bit more about, but this is a new innovation we brought to this round where we wanted to understand how best can I communicate with you? So you can see for John here, when communicating with me, please use simple gestures or simple pictures to help me understand and make choices. Here's some PAL cards in actions. You can see them hanging on wheelchairs and walkers and on doors. So the biggest question we get is, wait, what about HIPAA? So what we have done is talk to a lot of HIPAA privacy officers. We've talked to lawyers. Yes, you can duplicate the card and use it in your facility, and we're going to show you how to do that. The information is about preferences, and preferences are about recreation and leisure are not protected health information. Now, you've noticed we don't have preferences for personal care on here yet. We're going to try and crack that nut in a minute. I'll bring that up at the end of the presentation because that's where we want to go, because we know that's important information too. But from what we've been told, preferences are not protected health information. But of course, don't put a birth date on the PAL card. Don't put any diagnoses on PAL cards. So we help you guide to make sure that you're not violating HIPAA. And we also ask you to get permission from the individual or their family members if you can. Okay, so quality improvement. Why quality improvement? Because every nursing home is required to do quality improvement. And so we sort of have, founded our efforts in something that providers are already required to do. And it's also just a good idea for you to try something and see if it works before you just keep doing something that might not make any sense. And what providers were asked to do is they were asked to create 15 to 20 PAL cards. And the idea here was that it would give them enough that they could kind of get over the learning curve, and also they'd have enough in their community so that the community could decide, is this something we want to do for everybody or not? Maybe this is working great, maybe this is just not for us. We asked providers to discuss PAL cards during staff meetings and new employee orientations. We asked them to record some data for us that we're going to share with you. And we asked them to complete a final interview to reflect on the process. So as I mentioned, we revised the template to have some icons here for communication preferences. And these were the different communication preferences that the speech language pathology team we work with suggested that we have. And so again, this is a new innovation and we'll share some of this data with you, but you can see how, there's different ways, like maybe somebody needs their hearing aids in order to communicate with them. Maybe it's better to use gestures, those universal gestures. Maybe they need their glasses on. So these were all things that we added. Now, and also another feature of this QIP that we offered, and this is a collaboration, an ongoing collaboration we have with Link Senior, is we offered the opportunity to use our COMPASS website, which stands for Care Preference Assessment of Satisfaction. And this helps you automate that PAL card process. So we have paper and pencil, so folks can do it all paper and pencil, and we have a template that you can download in Word and type in the information and print out a PAL card, but we also have COMPASS. And this is where you can actually do the interview in the system, and then there's a checkbox here for a PAL card item. So when somebody really lights up, when somebody shares a lot of information about something, that's telling us that that's important to them. And so you notate it here, and then it helps you create the PAL cards. And so this is a little screen about how you can, it'll pull information that you've typed in into the PAL card, and you drag and drop it into the system to create a PAL card. You can create a custom title if you want, and then ta-da, here's the PAL card made and ready for you to print. And so we're really excited about that innovation too. Okay, so one thing, and Alex, you'll have to hop in when, I can't remember when you were supposed to take over, and I'll keep talking forever. So we had participants in this most recent version from Ohio, Missouri, and Colorado join us. The average bedside of the providers who participated had 81 beds. About 50% were not-for-profit, 38 for-profit, and 13% private pay. So those might have been assisted living communities, adult day. We have a variety of settings that participated, and 38% had 4- or 5-star ratings. And as I mentioned, we asked participants to collect data and join monthly calls, and we asked them to submit to complete 15 to 20 cards, and we interviewed folks and we recorded and transcribed those interviews. So that's why we have their direct quotes for you. And so this is an example of a log that we asked them to fill out. So we wanted to know, well, who did the interview? Which interview did they do? The 8-item interview is from the MDS, the recreation items from the 16 MDS Section F, or they might have used more items from the PELI. We want to know, how long it took them, if the resident, reviewed it for accuracy, that kind of thing. So here's a little bit of information findings. We had 57% of our providers. I see Alex breathing a sigh of relief. She's had Zoom issues for a couple of days now where her Zoom just decides to go off because, you know, life's not hard enough. We have to make things harder. Am I still doing okay, Alex?
You're doing good. Yeah.
Okay. Just tell me when you're going to take over.
Okay.
All right. So the majority of folks used 8 items to ask folks. To ask residents about their important preferences. We had about 14% used Compass. We had about 27% that used 34 items from the PELI. And we had one provider who had kind of created their own custom interview. And we're going to share all this with you. So don't worry. I know we're going fast, but we're going to share all of our slides with you. Okay, so who did the interviews? So we had a big chunk. Look at this, 85% activities, right? You are our people. You guys get things done. You understand your residents, you learn about them, and you have the power to share that information across the whole community. We also had some social workers and nurses join the effort. And the other category, typically administrators were a part of it, or sometimes, you know, pre-pandemic, we had volunteers. I know it's a foreign concept, but there were volunteers who could do this. So if you've got volunteers coming back in, this is a great opportunity for them. Okay, so how long did this take? When providers were using 34 items from the PELI, it took them to do the interview about 43 minutes with a range of 20 to 75 minutes. So there's a big range there in terms of how long it may take you to kind of collect the information you need. When they used the 8 items, they still took 26 minutes. So, you know, there's still a little bit of time commitment here with a range of 5 to 45 minutes. And then if they used Compass, it took a little bit longer. But remember, this is like just initial lifts. Like this is reflecting the initial learning curve. Most likely, as you become competent and doing these all the time, that's going to come down significantly. Okay, how long did it take you to create PAL cards? About 15 minutes with a range of 5 to 30 minutes. So again, a lot of this is just initially as you're learning how to do it, as you're trying to figure it out. So we would hope that that time would come down as you get better. Where were they placed? A big portion were placed on wheelchairs, walkers, and doors. We had some providers who put it on a wall in the room. We had some that did a bulletin board, and we even had a provider who, during the pandemic, created a whole new system that's called the purple bag, and we're going to tell you about that too. And 80% of the residents reported their PAL card accurately reflected their interests, which is great. And typically when there was something inaccurate, it was maybe the wrong name of a spouse or a child, or maybe the wrong name of the city where they grew up. So these were just small things that could be corrected and then replaced. Okay, so I think at this point, I want to turn it over to Alex so that she can share with you the actual voices of providers that we worked with. And I'm going to be quiet.
Thank you so much, Katy. Yeah, so Katy kind of shared with you the logistics of doing PAL cards. So like, you know, how long it took and things. That's what we learned from providers. While we were working with providers during the pandemic, we noticed that there were a lot of COVID-related themes that I'm sure you all experienced. So we noticed that there were a lot of structural changes. So you were experiencing halted admissions. Maybe you had to create and even construct isolation units. One community explained to me they had to physically build a wall to, you know, to separate residents who were sick from those who were not. Responsibility changed, and maybe you're taking on more work than you had before and different things like that. And then there was also the burden on residents. So they were physically isolated, their routines changed, they were experiencing loneliness. And we know that this, their struggles and troubles also affected you folks as well, who care deeply about them. And then in addition to that, we noticed that there was a lot of provider burnout. So there was the increased workload, mental exhaustion. The pandemic was hard. And so we don't need to tell you that. I know you folks experienced that. But how that related to the work that we were doing, for a lot of folks, it was a barrier. A lot of people who really wanted to do the PAL cards because of all of the challenges that they were up against had to drop out. And we completely understood, right? It was a really tough time. However, there were some folks who were able to just push forward and able to carry on. And that's what we're going to share with you today, is kind of what aspects of the project or what strategies they use to kind of help make them, help the project succeed in their communities. And so for many, like I said, COVID was a barrier, but then for those who were able to create PAL cards, despite against all odds, they found that it helped streamline care during COVID, reduce resident communications of distress, and maximize provider time and energy. So that's what I'm going to kind of dive into a little bit more today and explain kind of the how they were able to complete this during the pandemic. All right, next slide. Okay, so here's just a quote that we share, or that someone shared with me. And so participants shared how PAL card supported them in providing care when residents were required to remain in their room. So this quote, for example: "Now that therapy has to go room to room to room, instead of bringing residents to the therapy gym, they're able to utilize the PELI PAL card and explore them to their advantage." And so the therapy department especially was able to learn more about the residents and kind of get to know them while they were providing that one-to-one care in their room, and make it a little bit more personal than maybe they had in the past. But the therapy department wasn't the only ones that benefited from the PAL cards. You want to go to the next slide? So due to staffing shortages, many communities struggled to contain the outbreak. There were staff who were maybe new, or maybe staff were being pulled from different floors or different shifts. I spoke to a lot of communities who had maybe their front office staff even having to, provide care and be in roles that they hadn't before. And so this quote kind of highlights how the PAL card was able to help in those situations. So this person said, "I think this is the best time to have PAL cards present. I'm going to appeal to my administrator. So when the day comes and we have another opportunity to have a meeting that says, hey, we're going to be on the front lines, we're going to be passing trays, we're going to be spending time with the residents and visit them door to door, use this PAL card, use the talking points that are offered." So again, this was referring to staff who were coming from the front office to help, passing trays and helping provide care to the residents. So they really didn't have, like us in activities, have that deep or existing knowing or knowledge about the residents. So it was really helpful when that time when everyone was kind of all over the place and just pitching in as much as they could. Alrighty, so now I've teased you with just a few examples of how the PAL card was helpful during the pandemic. And so I'm sure you're all curious, okay, so how did they do it? Because again, we were all kind of pulling our hair out and just, struggling to keep our heads above water. So how did they implement this communication tool during a global pandemic? Well, in working with these providers, we identified a few ingredients that make up the secret sauce, as you could say. And these ingredients are teamwork, workflow integration, communication, and staff engagement. Alrighty. Okay, so just diving in. So we learned that it takes a team to implement something new. And I'm sure that this is true before the pandemic, but definitely as the pandemic was going full steam, it was really important. So the communities that were able to successfully implement PAL cards had a team of at least 2 staff members working on the project together. That way, if one person was out sick, there was at least one other person who kind of knew what needed to be done that could continue to move the project forward. But more importantly, having a team allowed communities to delegate various project tasks. So for example, a community may have had one person doing the interviews. So maybe while they were delivering, doing a one-to-one, they were also asking the PELI PAL card interview questions to help gather that information. And then the other person working on the project was then responsible for typing up and laminating the PAL card. Many communities also recruited an a multidisciplinary team, as highlighted by the quote that we have here on the screen. So the life enrichment coordinator has her assistant that has been helping her, and then the social worker has also, as the social worker has been getting information, be it from family members or from the care conference or just other things when she does her own assessment. So the social worker has been working pretty closely with life enrichment. So this community, as I said, had the social services and life enrichment working closely together to help gather that preference information. The most important aspect of this ingredient, however, is having support from leadership. So participants who had their administrator and the heads of other departments on board were the most successful. And so support from the leadership team, helped alleviate some of the barriers as well as some of the burden of the project. So while these leaders weren't maybe actively working on the project, they weren't doing the interview and sitting down and typing out the card, but how they were able to support was by communicating to their staff members, so maybe to the other nurses or to other housekeepers or the CNAs or whoever, so and so is working on this project, this is how it relates to your role, this is what we expect to use it. So kind of helping sharing the task of communicating what this new tool is all about. And similarly, administrators were able to kind of allocate staff time to the champions who are working on the project. So they said, this is a priority, we really need this tool. You can, make sure you, rearrange your schedule to have time to do that. And so that was really, really valuable in being able to move the project forward. All right, next slide. Alrighty, so consider integrating into existing workflow. So this was another big one, and this is actually what I think is really cool about the PAL card, is that it's very easily tacked onto things that you're already doing in your community. So one example was that providers thought, they wanted to create PAL cards for residents who are new to the community. And so they said, we need to engage the admissions coordinator. They're already collecting this, information before the individual even gets to our community. Let's have this person, maybe ask a few more questions or ask the PELI, the PAL interview to get the information that we're looking for. So that way, when this individual comes into our community, that we're already ready to get to know them, to have a PAL card for them, so we can quickly start providing care and making them feel at home. Similarly, everyone was offering a lot of one-to-ones. And so a lot of communities recognized that the PAL card interview was a really great opportunity to kind of help do a guided reminiscing and allow the resident opportunity to share information about themselves. So they would put on the calendar, PAL card interviews, and then so they kind of allotted time to do these interviews, and they also counted as a one-on-one, because the nature of these questions, you're getting to know what your likes are, what your interests are, a little bit about your past. And so it's a really great opportunity to reminisce. And so that's kind of how providers were able to kind of schedule it into their day-to-day. And then some communities decided they wanted to tack the PAL card interview process onto when they were doing their regular reassessments. And so so they, as a resident was coming up to be reassessed, whether it's quarterly or for their annual care plan, they were taking that information they were collecting and then putting it into the PAL card template, as opposed to kind of trying to do everybody all at once and kind of making more work. This is a regular scheduled task, and then the PAL card process just fit nicely onto the end there. And so this quote here is just kind of a goal that someone set for themselves. I'm looking at this project over the next 3 months, and my goal would be to have admissions help with the pointed questions so that we can have these PAL cards made within the first 2 weeks of admission. That would be my goal. And so again, engaging the appropriate people who are already collecting the information to kind of spread the workload and make this task work in their community. All right, next slide. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Okay, and so communication was also key to ensuring the PAL card project success. So from our experience learning from participants, it was really important to communicate to staff what the project is and what the expectations are. And so communities that were able to push forward and really have the PAL card kind of be used or engaged successfully in their community, they let staff know the communication tool was coming even before it even got onto the floor. So while they were working on the project, the champions were keeping the leadership team up to date. They were letting their QIP team know kind of what the progress is. They were reminding staff ahead of time, hey, we've got this new tool coming, keep an eye out for it. And then once the PAL cards were out on the floor, the champions shared information about what they are and how to use them via staff newsletters, emails. Some communities had this really neat kind of inter-community messaging system that is neat. So maybe that's a tool that your community has as well. They were talking about it during huddles, in passing, any in-services. So this next quote is kind of highlights a one community strategy. So we have an employee newsletter that goes out the first of each month. So I'm going to kind of explain what the cards are. So we'll be able to have the education now, so referring to kind of doing it in service, and then maybe put the cards out on Friday, and everyone will know what they are, and they won't be some random piece of paper stuck somewhere. And so that kind of last little bit of this quote here really highlights why it's so important to let people know what's going on and what your expectations are, because it could they could be very easily glossed over, but because these communities were, kind of hyping everybody up and getting everyone excited about this new tool, they were able to, staff knew right away how to use them. Alrighty, and then engaging staff. So kind of building on communication. Participants that had success with the PAL Card project also engaged staff in fun and different ways. So some fun ideas to encourage staff to use the PAL Cards included resident trivia questions in a staff newsletter. So in the staff newsletter, it said, who was the resident who was scouted by the Cavaliers, and so that information would be on someone's PAL card. And so then it was like, if you find this, if you find that resident, put a sticky note on my door and you get a candy bar or something like that, or a prize. Other folks did scavenger hunt, and so they kind of made a list of all the different kind of fun facts about residents. And so it was like, how did it work? It was like find which resident used to be an exotic dancer. That was one fun story that somebody shared with me. They learned that a resident was an exotic dancer. Which resident was one of 13 kids? And so this, so just kind of teasing them with this fun fact, then encourage them to go and read the cards and engage with the resident about, this information, like, oh, I didn't know you had 13 siblings, or, oh, I didn't know you were an exotic dancer. Tell me more about that. And so again, there were some prizes to kind of motivate as well, but then just knowing the fun information was really motivating too. And so I can read the quote to you. So the activity director does the little scavenger hunts, and if somebody gets to fill the whole thing out, maybe they'll get a candy bar. Who knows as far as staff goes, but it's kind of fun because they get awarded for getting to know the residents. But yeah, it's fun. I think the scavenger hunts are fun. It breaks up the day as far as nursing goes, and it makes people really look into it. So me as the director of nursing, I know my staff likes it. And so again, this is the director of nursing who's working with the activities director who was doing the, kind of leading the PAL Card project and doing the work. And so she was kind of engaging her staff or encouraging her staff to participate in the scavenger hunt and read the cards as well. Alrighty, okay, so what was the outcome of using these helpful strategies? So communities reported enhanced communication of resident preferences. So a lot of the folks that we worked with didn't have an existing method of communicating this important information. Like Katy said that, everyone was doing the assessments. We all have to ask these questions, but then it was just sitting in the drawer. So the PAL Card was a really helpful tool to help fill that gap. And so it's something even after, the pandemic or even before, it was, a really helpful tool, but especially during when, things were getting really hairy and it was hard to communicate just in general, it was really helpful to have that tool that was easily accessed. Staff, like I said, staff now had a tool to start meaningful conversations with residents. This was especially helpful as residents were restricted in their rooms. A lot of times activities may not have had access to residents who weren't able to do group activities. Residents were unable to have visitors. So having meaningful topics that are meaningful to the resident at staff's fingertips was really empowering to help them kind of improve quality of life and lift spirits of the residents who were, like all of us, experiencing extreme, drastic amounts of changes to our routines and to what we know and makes us comfortable. And we also heard that new or agency staff or staff who were kind of being shuffled around had a tool to quickly get to know residents. And then participants even noticed that the residents themselves, they felt a sense of pride in having their story shared in such a way. They really appreciated staff for taking the time to get to know them. They felt just joy with this deeper sense of knowing and just a greater sense of well-being and kind of comfort during this really difficult time. So the next few slides kind of highlight each of these outcomes. So enhancing communication about preferences. So looking at the calendar, okay, so today we have a gospel sing-along. So looking at those cards to kind of help the aide see if somebody did have a spiritual background or if they liked music. It kind of helped guide them on who to take to an activity to help the activity staff get them down there. because there's 6 aides and 1 activity person. So it's helpful to have that information at their fingertips. So for those of us who are in activities and kind of struggle to, maybe get everyone there to the different activities. So it was really helpful, aides were able to look at the cards and say, hey, this is something that's important to this person. I'm going to make sure that they attend this activity. And then similarly, this next quote says, so the direct care aides don't have time to look up their likes and dislikes or what they prefer. So referring to their chart or their medical record. So that card was a great, just something to very quickly look at and honestly know a lot about the residents. So again, it's really kind of filling this gap of, we've got this information, but it lives in a place that's really not convenient. And these, and we have staff who really need it and it can really help them in their day-to-day. And so these are great examples of that. We also have some examples of how it started conversations. So the PAL card helped direct care staff start off a conversation with them, walk into the room, just talking with them about what they like to do, and even helps them kind of know what channels they want to put on, what books, magazines. Some of them like to get the newspaper every day. So the direct care staff said that helped to make sure they got the paper. Even if they couldn't read it, they still like getting the paper. So again, it helped staff kind of start to pay attention about, what preferences they liked and how they could help, support the resident in pursuing those preferences. And then this next quote I really like too. This is someone that staff. So this is referring to a resident that staff maybe are more hesitant to approach. They're not sure how to approach them. This can be something very beneficial to use to approach them. When someone can't speak their preferences all the time. And so that's another really great example of how it was able to help staff engage the residents. And then supporting staff. So this is another long. So this one and is an example of a story that I've heard time and time again. But I'll read you this one and talk more about it. And so the champion that I was talking to said it's positive responses. Which obviously that's what you want. There was an STNA that said when they went to give a resident a shower, they were talking to them about one of their favorite dogs. And they had the name Benji. I guess their dog had the name Benji, and they weren't screaming at them and telling them to stop. And so when she was asking the resident what she liked to do, if they took them for a walk, she was saying that she was able to get her shower done. So the resident, I guess previously had some resistance to bathing, maybe a lot of anxiety around bathing, and would experience a lot of distress. And it sounds like it was very challenging for the direct care worker to provide that care. And so they looked on the card and brought up the name of the dog Benji, and then the resident started reminiscing about their dog Benji, saying they like to take them for walks. And then before you knew it, the resident was able to, have their shower without a battle. And this is one that we hear, I've heard different variations of the story from a lot of different providers that, especially during bathing, they found that using the information on the card to help kind of talk about topics that are comforting, helps alleviate a lot of those expressions of distress. That is really beneficial to the caregiver as it's, less stressful for them. And then obviously, increases the well-being of the resident who isn't experiencing that distress because they're talking about something that's comfortable to them or comforting to them. Alrighty, and developing stronger relationships. So this quote says, I'm amazed at how much stuff that I learned about them. And I thought I knew them pretty well. So I was like, oh, she was a pilot. This one was a nurse, and then got out of that and sold insurance. That you just don't know those types of things. I think it gives you a reminder that they're not just nursing home residents. They are people who have contributed to the community. They've been teachers. They've been contributing their whole lives. Sometimes we just get sidetracked and look at somebody that's here as, I just need to take care of them. And we lose that piece, that who they are and everything that they've done. And so this is something that I've heard time and time again. So not just from the champions, but then also from the direct care workers, from all the other staff in the community. They read the PAL card and they realize, oh, wow, this was a person who lived this whole incredible, beautiful, exciting life before they came here. And so they really enjoy getting to know that individual, but then also being reminded this is a person. And then a lot of times they can relate to them because, oh, this is a person who had, family members. I have lots of family members. Or this is somebody who also likes dogs. I love dogs. And so it's just a great opportunity to connect and to remind us that these are people that we're providing care for that had these beautiful lives, and not just, you know, someone to check off the to-do list. And so that's a really great example of that. And then this is another great example of how the PAL card enhanced well-being. I think it's valuable for the resident. I've seen a decrease in their falls because they're more involved, engaged with other staff besides the recreation staff. I should say they're more sociable. I saw a resident talking to another resident. She was actually reading on the back of her card. She said, "What's this?" And she was actually, I felt bad because she had her magnifying glass, and she says, "I used to watch TV in that program." And so then they were just going back and forth talking about old TV shows, and then they wanted to know if that show was still on the TV. Can you find it? So you see they're more engaged in conversation when they're together, not only with staff. And so this is a really great example of how it even can help residents engage with each other. And so I can just picture this resident with their magnifying glass reading somebody else's PAL card and saying, "Oh, I didn't know, I've loved that show too," and then reminiscing. And again, you know, it can be hard to approach people. I'm naturally an introvert, and so it's kind of hard for me to approach conversations. And so if I had some quick topics that could help me make a friend, you know, in a flash, I would appreciate that. And so that's kind of what this is highlighting here as well. Alrighty, and so then Katy mentioned earlier, we do have some a provider innovation. And so at one community, this is a really great idea that we want to share. They took the PAL card and then took it a step further. So they used the information on the PAL card to create individualized bags with activity items related to the residents' interests. So some things, for example, were crossword puzzles, coloring books and pencils, decks of cards, iPods with their favorite music, Bibles, things like that. And it was all kind of based on the information that was on the PAL card. And then this helps staff provide activities on, isolation units, or if, activities was restricted and not able to provide care to some residents for whatever reason, things were changing. It really helped all staff who had access to the resident help facilitate meaningful activities with them. And so this is just a fun idea we wanted to share. Alrighty, and then Katy, I think, is it turning back over to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a great question, and maybe we can answer this question real quick and then I'll wrap up. So how can this work with dementia and Alzheimer's patients who are extremely uninterested in conversation? And so, this is something that is even more valuable. When we started working with providers, we told them you can do it with anybody. And we thought they'd work with the easiest residents, the ones who could communicate, but actually they went to the individuals with dementia who could not communicate, because they knew that that was the more challenging situation. And so we have lots of resources to help you. If you can't talk to the individual, we have ways that you can engage if there's family or friends. And if there's not family or friends, there's some staff observations that we have, steps that you can use to get some of that information and get it on the card. And then the individual doesn't have to try and explain themselves every time. And so having that information on a card can actually help all the staff interact with an individual with dementia. Would you add anything to that, Alex?
Oops, sorry, I muted myself. Yeah, no, I think that covered it. So like Katy said, providers kind of went for the folks, they recognize that individuals who can't communicate, this is really beneficial. And so family is a great resource. And then even relying on what staff know, for via observation, or maybe looking back at past assessments. So before the individual may have declined in their cognitive status, what did they report as important before? Those are good indicators of what's going to be successful for that individual now.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So,
Alex,
yeah.
Sorry, Alex. There's another question in the Q&A box where Veronica is asking if the resident doesn't have an assistive mobile device, where can we place the PAL card?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the PAL cards have also been placed on residents' doors, so kind of like going into their room. So as someone's getting ready to provide care, they can quickly glance at it and go in. We've had some communities even put it, they've had private rooms with private bathrooms, so they put the PAL card there. And so as maybe they're providing care and giving the residents some privacy, they can read the card. It's right there where they're providing care. Bulletin boards in the resident's room. Again, if it's someone who maybe stays in their room and doesn't leave, kind of just where that person is. We've also had some communities make multiple copies, and so they may have one on a wheelchair or walker somewhere, but then also one on kind of like a key ring. They kind of hole punch them and put them all together, and that lives in the staff break room. So while staff are on break, they can kind of flip through and say, oh, I didn't know Betty won the spelling bee when she was in 5th grade. I don't know, something like that. And so that's another great thing about the PAL card is it's flexible. Ideally, the goal is that it kind of stays near the person. So as someone's interacting with them, that information is there. But again, if that doesn't work for everyone, you can kind of make it work for you in those different ways. Great question.
Yeah, and we're happy to, if anybody's interested in doing this, just reach out to us. We're happy to help you. So let me just wrap up. So we're really hoping to learn more from providers who are using Compass about how we can make that better. We also want to hear more about the communication icons, and we want to figure out how to crack the nut of how to communicate personal care preferences. And so this could have, it wouldn't be a HIPAA violation necessarily, but it could be a privacy issue. You might not want everybody to read about your bathroom preferences, right? So anyway, we're trying to crack that nut next. And if anybody has any ideas, we would love to hear them. And so we'll, hope to hear for that. Okay, are you guys ready for one more quick Mentimeter activity? All right, so go back to your menti.com and let me go to my next, hang on a minute, let me go back to my screen. And I want to go to my next question. All right, so now the next question, and this is something that we'll probably run out of time for, but if you tell us, imagine you were to implement PAL cards in your community, what kinds of things would you hear? We think of these as barriers and facilitators, and this is what we love to hear about in terms of what do we need to come up with? What solutions do we need to be able to have for you to do this work? And then that's what we love to try to help. Like, what are the pain points? What are the things that help you? How can we help you get more of the things that support you? How can we remediate some of the barriers to this work? So if you can go in teamwork, yes. So go ahead and just add a few thoughts in here as you have them. And then we'll share with you just a couple of things that we're doing. Easier to personalize care. Exactly. The PAL cards will make it easier to personalize care. I didn't know that about you. How exciting. Exactly. Right? Like, I didn't know you were a high school pageant, beauty contestant. That's fantastic. Again, this is person-centered care. It's helpful. You can get to know people quickly, right? We do have so many, there's so much more in common that we have with one another than there is that separates us. So it's just fantastic. Exactly. I like that too. No time. Huge barrier. Learning new things that the resident can teach you based on a one-to-one basis. Wow, I can communicate with you, right? You can provide better care. You can understand their purpose. It helps build community. Oh my gosh, these are fantastic. More engagement, learning new and exciting things. Clear communication and goals to empower staff and celebrate residents, happy staff. Wow, that's huge. More engagement, better relationships. Aren't these all the things you guys mentioned at the beginning when we asked you what you loved about your job? Right? So again, I think that there's just so much here that we want to do, and we want to help you figure out the barriers. Okay, so I'm going to stop because Charles is going to pull me off stage with the hook here. Let me just share with you a couple of quick things that we're doing, and then I will be quiet. One thing that we're doing is that we're starting a new quality improvement project. It's called the Individualized Positive Psychosocial Intervention. If you'd like to hear more about us, here's the link. Alex will drop the link into it. We can tell you more about it. We also have this super cool emotion-focused communication professional certificate that we're offering in partnership with Miami University. And Alex will drop this link in the chat. You end up with the certificate of communication. It helps you learn to recognize your own emotions to then be able to provide care to others. Vital for people providing care to people with dementia. And this is something you could put in your HR packet, your resume. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. check out our website, and we've got a monthly newsletter, and we don't share your information with anybody, so please stay in touch with us. And again, I just want to thank Link Senior. Thank you all for your time and attention, and I'll turn it back over to you, Charles.
Thanks so much, Katy. Amazing work and an amazing update. As some of you realized, Katy and Alex were already on our Activity Strong webinar, so it's a pleasure to have you back. Here are, if anyone's interested, and I hope all of you are interested, Katy and Alex's details. Let me share with you why I personally think it's worth a conversation. A lot of the work presented here is actually free, right? So that's obviously one reason, which is a good reason. But I think the true reason is that we all show up at work for purpose, right? Because we seek purpose in what we do. And like the mentee initially showed us, the mentee that Katy did, a lot of us are passionate about helping elders find purpose. And you can only have the source of purpose, understand the people, when we have a true tool and mechanism and workflow around that. So what I personally love about whether it's the PELI or the PAL card is obviously it's evidence-based. There's a lot of work. There's actually years of work in it. But it's also a tool that's been demonstrated to support this idea of interdisciplinary teamwork, which is probably one of the biggest outcomes of this pandemic. It's something that leading organizations like the Pioneer Network have advocated for years. And it's something that we're seeing more and more of in communities, which is great. And so this type of work actually enables you to do more in that direction, which is great. And ultimately, probably the main reason is that it enables us to do the work that we want to do, right, which is person-centered care. So thank you again, Katy. Thank you again, Alex. Anyone, please at least consider a conversation with them and hear their contacts. And Megan also shared the slides, the PDF, so feel free to reach out and have more information there. I do want to mention a couple highlights, which is some of you might be aware that last year we at Link Senior, in partnership with Activity Connection, NAP, NCAP, and Virtual Connection, we developed a program library. And this is one of the elements that unfortunately Katy and Alex didn't get to in their presentation, is that their team actually spent a lot of time with different experts, including CTRSs, and therapists, and understanding how to create, and I never know how to pronounce this word, IP cards. And so if you do a search in this library that we've put out, and I think that we've pasted the link here, you will find a number of these IP cards, which are again evidence-based interventions. And then the good thing with this program library is that you can fine-tune the different filters and so on. And again, this is a free resource. So with that being said, I'd also like to invite all of you to some of our upcoming webinars. The one on August 3rd, I'm particularly excited and passionate about. Donna is the CEO of an organization called Isaacson Living. In the wake of the pandemic, she and their team decided to stay and live on the campus, right? And I know that some of others have done that, but it's just an amazing story of true leadership, true teamwork, again, towards one goal, which is bettering the life of our elders and obviously protecting them at the beginning of with the pandemic. On Tuesday, August 17th, we have a wonderful organization called Christian Horizon. So Kathy Kruer from the corporate team and two of her community life enrichment people, Crystal and Shannon, will be joining us about this discussion about how can we correlate engagement, right, resident engagement, to clinical and business outcomes, which is something that we all see to do. And I'm also very excited about this September 7th presentation. So Mallory has done a lot of work. She leads life enrichment for a multi-site organization called Frontier Management. And she's a big advocate of Montessori practice, Montessori method. And she's taking a risk with her presentation in a good way. She's talking about actually taking risks when we think about engaging the older adult, right? Often, because unfortunately our line of work is under the healthcare kind of general industry, we have a lot of rules, a lot of regulations. We think about mitigating risk. And sometimes that hampers the life and the quality of life of our residents, right? So Bill Thomas always advocated for, do we really need to go with safety first, right? And so Mallory in this presentation is going to be talking about how can we explore risk, autonomy, and independence in this balance. And so last but not least, I'd love to invite you to some of our upcoming gatherings on September 21st, December 7th, and our virtual summit next year. With that, thanks everyone. Katy, thank you. Alex, thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon. And to all of you, thank you for the work that you do.